my lights aren't.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You look great. You look phenomenal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a conversation with, and I am your humble host, Floyd Marshall Junior. And I am really excited about tonight's guest, James Doc Mason, because we're going to be talking about something that for a lot of screenwriters is something that is elusive, and that is how to craft and construct a phenomenal log line. When I was writing scripts for a while, that was the one thing that would always trip me up. And my good friend Tanya Kersey, may she rest in peace, she was very bullish on you having a phenomenal log line for your script because that is the first thing that an executive sees when your agent or your manager is able to get the script to them. That's what pulls them in. That's what makes them say, hey, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Send that over. I want to read that. So we have here again James Doc Mason, and he wrote a phenomenal book, Mastering the Log Line: How to Get a Hollywood Executive Excited in One Sentence. Did I get that right?
Yeah, very close. It's how to excite Hollywood in a single sentence.
How to Excite Hollywood in a
But
Single
believe me, I
Sentence.
worked on that for a long time, so I get that
Okay.
right. And I
So,
like to say that a log line is one of four promises that the writer can make to the
okay.
potential reader, the Hollywood executive or their assistant, that gets the script to the top of the page and gets it in
Mhm.
their hands and gets the pages turning. So
Okay.
we
And
can talk
yeah,
about the other three promises, but the book is about.
yes, we're going to talk about that. We're definitely
Sure.
we're definitely going to talk about that. But James, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. Glad we were finally able to put this together. And the thing that I always like to ask my guests starting off is, how did you get started in this business?
Right, that's a great question, and it started when my oldest son uh, was not yet born, and I needed to get a regular job. That was 30 something years ago. And I got a job of all places at Blockbuster Video. And I realized that this little, no nothing, part time job, it ended up being my life. It was my passion. Movies were my passion. I just didn't know it when I was in
Mm,
my, early 20s. And so um, years later, I ended up going to film school to study how to be a director. I moved to Hollywood. I directed a film, decided I would never do that again, and realized that my real passion was in writing for film. And so I spent the next 10 years, um, well, raising kids. I have four, and learning how to write, reading everything I could possibly read, uh, teaching when I could, leading a writers group, and becoming one of the administrators of the Logline group that's on Facebook. And over the years, we taught Christopher Lockhart's method of the three C's. It's all about conflict. Loglines are all about describing the central conflict. And I felt like he was describing it from a reader's perspective and on an executive's perspective.
mhm,
Very good. But what I needed to do is I needed to talk to writers on and how to express themselves, right? So over the years, I kind of developed this idea that I explore in the book, which is log lines are uh, comprised of elements that from the story, and we need to describe all those elements, and there's 9 of them. We have
mhm.
to describe them in one sentence of about 30-35 words, and that's why the book exists, because it's not an easy thing to know what to include and what to leave out.
Hmm. So let's back up because you said something very interesting. You said that the way Christopher Lockhart uh, came at a log line was from the executive standpoint. But the one thing that writers are always taught is you have to write for yourself first. So did you often find writers in a state of confusion because they're writing because they want a studio to look at their work? So
Well,
they
I
may
think they
have.
want to describe the story first, and
Okay.
that I think is the probably the biggest mistake.
Hmm.
The logline is not a description of the story; it's a
Hmm.
description of just the central conflict.
Okay.
And um, so, um, when you're trying to describe too much, if
Hmm.
you don't know what to include and what not to include, you really struggle because we spent months writing a script, and everything is important.
Hmm.
So how can you describe it in 35 words? So I think, um, you know, most people want to kind of wow the audience or wow the reader. And when I think even a basic log line that actually describes the central conflict gives the reader more to salivate over
Hmm.
than fancy use of words,
Hmm.
right? So
Okay. So you said you worked at Blockbuster, but you also owned your own video store, correct?
I did, yeah, yeah. So Blockbuster led me to meet a very interesting guy who claimed to have 10,000 videos. And I said, if you ever open a store, I will manage this store for you.
Mm.
And he came to me a couple months later and said, I'm ready to open a store. And I went to his house, and his wife's like, I got to get these videos out of here because
Mm.
when you have 10,000 videos, and he was an avid collector of
Mm.
everything. Uh, it was just overwhelming, his house, and he had a big house. And so I spent about 6 months preparing all the videos for rental. And after the first week, he decided he didn't want to be in the video rental business anymore.
Oh wow.
And that's a long time ago. Remember Bebe's Kids?
Yes.
Uh, so it was next door to Faison Love's parents, and
Mm.
Bebe's Kids starred Faison Love.
Mm.
And that was the week that the store opened and closed.
Oh
So
wow.
so I was out of luck and out of a job. That's a long time ago. And a friend of mine said, this video store is looking um, to shut down. Maybe you could buy their inventory, because I
Mm.
wanted to. So I went there, and I didn't really have a lot of money. And I said, uh, can I buy them over time? And just, anyway, they made it very easy for me to get into the store back in the time when, you know, um, my video store was like 400 square feet. It was tiny.
Mm. Mm.
And I grew it to thousands of videos, and had quite a following. And I loved it. It was, watching movies all day long. It was quite an education. And then I went to film school in the afternoon. And I was, in my mid 20s, I was still older than pretty much everybody. And so they kind of looked up to me, and told me that I was going to be a great director because I seemed to know a lot about film. And I'm like, okay, I bought it. But really, what happened was, um, when I came to Hollywood and I started writing, I was writing in Frank Zappa's old studio during the day. He had been long gone, but it was a editing facility, and I was writing during the day and then going home at night and entering it all into the computer. I mean, I was literally writing.
Mm.
And that was my first script. And I finished that in 1996, and almost got it made in 1999. And here's the thing about persistence, right? All these years later, it's in pre-production again. It's going to be filmed later this year.
Oh,
So
so that is so that's the film that you were talking about in the bio when you sent me an email.
Journey to Now, yeah,
Oh wow, that is so
yeah.
interesting. But really
Because
quickly, I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, 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 please.
Yeah, well, it's when your stories resonate,
Hmm.
uh, and you can easily describe them, um, people kind of connect to them, and it connects with, certain stories can connect on a very visceral level. And this one particular producer, um, he just couldn't let go. And so even though it didn't get made in the early 2000s, 15 years later he found me and said, let's try and do it again. And we almost got it made right before the pandemic, and then the world fell apart. And I had another movie that was made, and we uh, talk about bad luck. We had our world premiere on the Saturday before the country closed down, so we did
Wow.
not have a theatrical release. And you can
Wow.
find that uh, on the internet. It's called Caged, Caged,
Wow.
with starring Eddie Gathegi and Melora Hardin from The Office, and Angela Sarafian. She's great. These are great actors. I mean, it was a fantastic little movie that um, deserved a big theatrical release. But
Mm.
you know, that's the fate of Hollywood, right?
You know what? Things happen, and you have to learn the art of the pivot. But I want to ask you about working in the video store and then owning the video store and watching thousands of movies. How did that prepare you for being the type of writer that you are now, but more
Right.
importantly, being someone who was able to write a book centered around log lines that would help other screenwriters?
Let me take another step back and say that my degree
Okay.
is in advertising. And
Ah, okay.
specifically, I started out as a copywriter, but then I moved into, I'm just a process manager now. I
Hmm.
don't really do anything creative. But what that allowed me to do, and I've been doing that for 25 years, is that allows me to really understand the process, break down where the efficiencies and the inefficiencies are, and try to make the process as smooth as possible.
Hmm.
And so that's what allowed me to write the book the way I did. But um, when to the content of the book, the way the video store, has genres, like Blockbuster would have comedies and dramas and horror and sci-fi and all the really basic ones. Well, in my store, I broke it down. So I had, serial killer genre, right? I
Mm.
really wanted to know how these movies were similar and how they were different and how a movie might fit into different genres. So I was always thinking about how the audience would perceive the story. So I could recommend, you tell me what kind of movie you want to watch, and I could recommend something based on what you wanted to watch. So that's really about setting expectations and delivering on expectations. The one great thing is this was before the internet. So we had these um, movie guides that had little tiny descriptions, one sentence descriptions of a movie, or maybe two, much like a logline, right?
Hmm.
And I was poring over those every single day, trying to learn the all the movies that Scorsese did and looking all this up so I could really kind of um, find the best movies for my video store. And I ended up with thousands of videos in my store before we closed down. And nothing like the 10,000 that the other guy had, but
Right.
that was a great training ground. Those 6 months of preparing those videos allowed me to understand some of the best movies ever made. And in my book, I don't just reference modern movies. I'm referencing movies from all of cinema to make the examples. And I have in the book, I have over 50 examples of breaking down movies that if you don't know, you'll get to know very briefly in a page or so. And then I'll break that down into a log line. And hopefully, when you read the book, you'll want to maybe watch that movie,
Hmm.
right? Maybe from the example, maybe from the log line.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
because they're all great movies. Those are, you know, just all genres.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
So you said earlier that you're an administrator of a group, a Logline Facebook group.
right.
Um, can you talk about that and exactly what happens in the group? What do you guys do? And is it
Right.
something that people
It's
are in every
free.
day?
Yeah, no, I try to, but I get kind of busy. But we have another administrator who
Mhm.
also happens to be James Patrick Joyce, um, and there are other some fabulous contributors that may not be administrators, but they are active on the site and in the group, I should say. And so someone will post their log line or what they think is a log line, and and part of being a member of the group is agreeing to read not necessarily my book, but Christopher Lockhart's article
Mhm.
or other things that kind of we're not talking about newbies, but it turns out we do get a lot of you know newbies.
Okay.
And so they express their logline, and just like any good mentor, James has his way of approaching. um, other people in the group will approach it a different way. Some will be very blunt, like a studio executive, and just say pass. But this is not really about you know you know ego stroking,
Hmm.
right? The group is about learning how to write log lines. And my process is, can I identify all the different elements of the story? And if I can't, then we have either a problem with the story, or we have
Hmm.
a problem with the log line. And I try to find. I'm never going to tell you how to write your log line. I might have some suggestions, or or have some probing questions, um, and try to find a good solution. Um, and the thing is that log lines are iterative, right? So we try, like, if I were to rewrite some of the log lines from my movies from, uh, last year, I might do it slightly different than I did this year.
Hmm.
I look at some of the stuff I've written in the past and go, wow, um, that's pretty good.
Hmm.
That's nice. So I hope that when people join the group and they submit their logline, and they inevitably get notes that make them consider or reconsider things that they hadn't thought of before, that they can approach. Um, this is just a process.
Hmm.
And the really great thing about log lines and the reason my book is 280 pages and not just some thin little, thing, is that I really go into the elements of story. And if the elements aren't there in the log line, it makes us consider, well, is it in the story or not? And so the log line becomes a tool um, for identifying potential story problems. And if you give out a log line that has potential story problems, the professionals are like keyed in on that. They see it,
Hmm.
right? They know that, well, this is going to be unfortunately, like, if English is not your primary language, and you try and write it and you have bad grammar, it may be that you just need a native speaker to tweak it so that it doesn't indicate that your script is going to be this torturous read, right? Just like, um, you want to. There's so many different elements um, that the log line um, conveys, right? This idea of genre and tone that aren't necessarily plot and character,
Hmm.
and and if you're going to master the log line, you have to master all of it.
Hmm.
So
So you talked about the fact that if you have, and I'll just use this a weak log line, it may be an indicator of a weak story or a story that has issues. But have you guys, or have you yourself ever run across a log line that was just absolutely horrible, but you said, you know what, I'm going to read that script anyway because it's something about what they said that just intrigues me. So I'm going to give this a
right,
whirl. And
right,
then you find out that it's not the script, but it's the log line.
right. So here's the thing. Um, I talk at the very beginning about the four promises,
Hmm. Well,
and
let's talk
the
about
log.
let's talk about that now.
Yeah, because this is a really good. There are four promises that the writer can make that will get the reader to read the script,
Hmm.
and log lines is just one of them. If if a friend of mine comes to me with a script, I don't care what the log line is. I don't care what the story is. I'm reading their script. It's just because they're my friend. Uh, if it's um, if it's Quentin Tarantino script or Aaron Sorkin script, they got a reputation, right? Um, so just like your friends, they're just bigger. So we're gonna read those scripts no matter what. And then reputation and recommendation. So if a friend, like if an agent came to me and said, "Read the script, tell me what you think," if I respect that person, then yeah, I'm going to read it, right? Or even if it's a member of my writers group and they say I have a friend who, uh, is, um, can you read his script or her script? Yeah, damn right I will.
Hmm.
Because I mean, if you're going to tell me that it's worth reading, then I'm going to read it. So reputation, and recommendation, and logline. The fourth one is premise. And the premise is the big one because that one doesn't require, it is really the promise of conflict. So where the logline describes the specifics of conflict, the premise describes the promise of conflict. And what I mean by that is that it's just an idea without character, without plot, without stakes, without goals. It's like, that sounds interesting. I can't wait to see what the writer did with that. That alone could get me to read the script, right? Even if I don't know the person or they weren't recommended and so sometimes if a logline is weak in the elements of a logline, it might be really super strong in the elements of a premise. And yeah, so it can work, right? The ultimate goal is to get the industry professional to read the script, right? And I'm suggesting that the writer understand their premise and what a premise is, of course, understand their logline, what their central conflict is, what kind of main character they have, what their opposition is, the conflict. And then work on reputation and recommendation separately. There are things that even the newbie writer can do to elevate their status and get a recommendation, like win a contest, right? You can, if you have a friend, who knows somebody, if your script is good enough and they feel you're ready, they might recommend it to an agent or a manager. So you can do all four of those things. I actually wrote an article for Creative Screenwriting magazine on the 4 promises. You can go to that website and read it. It's a interesting little article that makes you think about all the little steps you can take to further your screenwriting career. And loglines is like for me the most important thing that the writer can do for themselves to get their story read. Start with the kick-ass. I mean, nobody's going to invest months of their time to write a bad premise. Like, you start with the good premise. Let's assume that we all have a great premise. Learn how to express that, and then learn how to write out that log line so it's just kick ass and people go, holy shit, yeah, I want to see that. Because what you're doing with the log line and the premise is you're setting expectations for the reader. Just like a genre is like this giant funnel, right? That says you want to watch a thriller. Okay, now do you want to watch a serial killer movie? Do you want to watch a serial killer movie where the serial killer is the good guy, right? And you can get into the minutia with the genre, right? And they have all of these different genres have expectations that the audience comes to the story with. So you have to make sure your story delivers on those expectations. And one of the ways that a reader can at least get the indication that it does is through the log line. So if you say, I got a serial killer movie that where I want you to root for the serial killer. There are not too many movies like that, but you can think of some TV shows that have done that in the past, like
So
Dexter or whatever.
yeah, Dexter. That's when you were talking about the serial killer. That's a good guy. That's the first thing that popped in my head. But
Yeah.
with the four things that you just talked about, how many writers, even veteran writers, are actually aware, if you understand what I'm saying, of those 4 things that you need? Some are, I know this is going to sound very strange, but some are unawarely aware, if that's even a word. They know what they're supposed to do, but they can't put a name to it, but they're doing it. But how do you point that out to the screenwriter who may be struggling, and you're pointing out those 4 things that they need?
Sure. Well, the thing is, I say those 4 things, those 4 promises are all vital for every writer. And I think the professional screenwriter, they look to their friend network, right? For feedback, they might not put the words, recommendation to it, but they also have access to agents and managers who are doing the recommendations for them,
Mm.
right? Because of their reputation, right? So they're constantly working on their reputation, whether they call it that or not, right? They're trying to write the best script, right? So they're going to their I mean, Quentin Tarantino does not write a script on his own. He has a team of people who are giving him feedback, whether it's, other writers or producers or even actors who are reading the part and saying, Sam Jackson, I'm sure, says to him, you know, this is really cool. I'd love to do this. And I'm sure, Quentin Tarantino says, hell yeah, let's do it. I don't know that for a fact,
Right.
but that's the way it is, right? These they just have they're acting on a higher level than the new, but the new one, like for instance, in my writers group, I have a writer who's written one script. She's an actress. She's a very good actress, and she wrote the script for herself to play. And I'm like, no, you're a writer, right?
Mm.
She's got a reputation with me. Right now, all she has to do is expand. Well, she has a reputation with our group because we're the ones, and she has a reputation with her friends because they all know it's a good script. Now, it's just about expanding that in the professional ranks. She may not want to be a writer, but uh, that reputation will help get her story read and perhaps even her movie made. And it all starts with what's on the page and who you are as a person, and being open and seeking to make yourself better in each of these things, like mastering the log line, understanding what makes a good premise, um, expanding your network, professional network and friends network, who all are warriors, like real true warriors for you, right? You don't go into this town alone.
Mm.
Right? I think about, I have a couple projects in pre-production, and I'm thinking about all the people who are just working their asses off, essentially for me. I mean, for the producers, right? But it's my name is going to be up there. It's like, and these people are working for me. That expands my reputation,
Mm.
and I don't want to let them down. I want to be the best that I can be, and so in combination with the background in the video store and in advertising, I try to break it down as thoroughly as possible so that if you don't understand it, maybe I over explain sometimes, but I really feel like if we understand the core elements of the different elements of story, then we're going to have a better time writing uh, quality work. Your first drafts will come faster. Your rewrites will come faster. You'll understand when people say something, and you understand the note behind the note, as opposed to trying to take what they're saying as, that feeling, I'm sure. um, and because you understand how all the mastering the logline is really about mastering the elements of story and how they work together. And if someone says, well, this, this is what I want for your story, I'm like, well, sure, I can make that work, but consider this, right?
Mm.
Or this is going to be a problem because, right, you understand, and you understand also how to overcome those problems because you understand how all the elements work together.
Mm.
So
So
yeah.
let's talk about the three things. I don't know if it's a must. Well, you're the expert, so I'll ask and you can correct me. What are the three things that a log line must have to get someone to say, I want to read that script?
Conflict, conflict, conflict. Well, okay, so I'm being facetious, but really, truly, number one, without a doubt, is conflict.
Mhm.
And that means understanding that the main character wants something, needs something, and they have an opposition, whether it's, an antagonist or a villain or a monster or, Mother Nature or a vampire, whatever, um, whatever that opposition is, it's preventing them from getting what they need and want, and that's the nature of conflict. And the second thing that a logline must have is um, it must visually represent the story. So we talk about that in different ways in the book. Like, for instance, context and setting. A setting could be a visual anchor for the story that kind of puts us in the place of the POV character, the main character. It could be word choice. It could be the external achievable goal. Like, for instance, we don't have internal goals, we have external goals because we're.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are having a slight technical problem. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We're live, so it happens.
Okay. So I was talking about the visual anchor of the setting, the external achievable goal, which basically means that the goal of the main character must not be an internal goal. It can't be, they've got to change their mind. It has to be they have to accomplish something, and that thing that they have to accomplish must be able to be accomplished within the context of the story, within the story itself. And it must have stakes. So, and the stakes are as important as, a goal, because the stakes are why the character must achieve their goal. In other words, why must we see that story through to the end so that we can see if they achieve their goal? So I would say visual, conflict number one, visual and stakes. I don't know if maybe conflict, stakes, and keeping a visual. I don't know. They're all important to me.
So you know what, when you said conflict and an outside force, let me ask you a question. Dr.
Sure.
Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
because
that wasn't, it was, would you consider that an external force, because it was the same person, but basically a split personality? So if you're writing a script such as that, how does one craft a log line to where, it looks as if the conflict is coming from outside when it's actually internal? So how would someone do something like that? Or is that even a thing?
Well, yeah, I believe it is. I think that it is an internal conflict, but it really is externalized in the fact that it is dual personality. And so you can think about it as a separate character, because he has to battle himself, but he doesn't know it's himself, I think, until the end. I'm not sure if I remember exactly how the structure of the story works. But yeah, the idea is this is the opposition. The external opposition is actually technology. It's how we are dealing with a man's place in the world. I'm saying Dr. Jekyll's place in the world, and so the conflict is. That one's really, really interesting. I should kind of do a deep dive on that and really understand it, because I haven't read that story since forever ago. I haven't seen a movie about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in a long time. So yeah, that would be an interesting little bit of homework for me.
Yeah, because the last movie I saw with him as a character was the movie with Sean Connery.
Sean Connery.
Yeah, it was Sean Connery, and they had it was Captain Nemo, Dorian Gray,
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and he was. You could basically see him battling because they were basically talking to each other. So when you say outside character, that's the one film that came to mind where he was actually talking to the bad part of himself.
Yeah. In Spider-Man, the Green Goblin had that kind of dual personality as well. I would say in the log line, it's not so much important to differentiate the two as two aspects of the same character, but to understand what the conflict is, and if if the conflict is more of an oppositional force of, say, technology, or is it actually a villain? You know, it could be. I think you could actually write it as two separate characters and then in the story reveal that it's the same character who's just like them, just like in the story he has to understand that it's the dual nature of man or people.
Yeah,
Trying to be
because another one that comes to mind is the M. Night Shyamalan movie. Oh goodness gracious, where
Shattered.
Samuel L. Jackson, I can't remember the guy. He had like 10 different personalities.
Mr. Glass, was it?
It,
Was it?
Samuel Jackson was Mr. Glass, but the gentleman the character that was in the insane asylum. Oh goodness gracious, I cannot remember the name.
Right.
It's gonna come to me. But he had multiple personalities.
Yeah.
And basically Samuel L. Jackson pitted him against Bruce Willis.
Right.
But I can't remember the name of the character.
Well, that's fine, because it brings up a good point, and that is what we're looking for is not in the logline. What we're looking for is not all the bad guys, but the bad guy, the true opposition, which it's easier to identify if you think about the climax of the story. And this is why I say, how can you write the beginning of a movie if you don't know the ending? Because the climax of the story is the resolution of your central conflict. And I say central conflict, the primary conflict of the story, the one that when it resolves, either gives the main character the desired outcome that they want, or it ushers in immediate negative consequences. And I mean ushers in because if they fail, it can't be, well, the stakes might happen. No, they must happen. Right? So the stakes are related to the goal somehow. In the best movies, sometimes they're not, but I'm not saying that all movies are great or follow the formula. There's no formula for storytelling. It's there's got to be room for playing in the sandbox, so to speak.
Right.
But so when you have multiple, like in a Spider-Man movie where they got three main villains, I got to think about this. How do you describe the central conflict in a movie that has three main villains? Because that's just the nature of the superhero movie, of the Spider-Man movie. So you look to the climax of the story, and when the climax of the story has the Green Goblin, and the Green Goblin is one of a couple villains. Well, let's focus the logline on the Green Goblin, and if it's really kind of, how do I put this? If it's how like you have an ensemble cast, and I describe in one of my main characters being the leader of an ensemble. Well, you could have the leader of an ensemble of bad guys too, and you'd only describe, just as you'd only describe the leader of the ensemble for the main character, you'd only describe the leader of the ensemble of, not the henchmen, not the minor conflicts. Leave all that out. Leave that for the story, or even for a shorter synopsis, maybe. But you have this this idea that we really need to focus the central conflict, so that it's like the skeleton of the story, where the reader knows what they're going to get, and all that other stuff is, when you're making a turkey sandwich, you've got to have turkey and you got to have bread, but all that other stuff, the tomatoes, the lettuce, the mayonnaise, the whatever it is you want to put on there, that's all extra that we'll just have to wait and see. Save that for the synopsis or for the actual script.
Right. So yeah, the movie was Mr. Glass. The movie
Yes.
was Mr. Glass. Yeah, that was the name of the movie. But I wanted to talk to you really quickly about collaboration, because you mentioned earlier when screenwriters are building the reputation and things like that. You spoke in another interview about the importance of collaboration. So to you, why is, and I'm big on relationships.
Mhm.
because this business moves on relationships. Because
Absolutely.
and I'll quote something that you said, and I may get a little bit of it wrong, but you talked about yourself, and when you're writing a script and getting it turned into a movie, that your reputation in the business is not really going to get you that next gig. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the relationships and the
Yeah.
collaborations
Yeah.
that you've
Yeah.
built that will get you that. So can you talk about that briefly for someone
Sure.
who may be, um, just coming in this business, or could be a veteran, and they're a little frustrated because they think things aren't happening the way they should be.
Well, I don't know anybody who has a absolute way things should be. So,
Right.
however it happens is the way it should happen. So, I will say this: um, you can write a really crappy movie that nobody likes. It's unsuccessful in the box office, and yet people, the people you work with, will love you, right? Because you are somebody they want to work with. You know, success. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but success um, is, like you said, it's about the personal relationships. And if you're good, then as a writer, uh, your reputation grows. We kind of mentioned that,
Yes.
and if you're difficult to work with, your reputation grows. And what you really need is to understand that it's the most important thing you can do is learn as much as you can, sure. But if you're not building your relationships, then all the stuff you've learned, I mean, means nothing. I spent 10 years not really doing much of anything except for learning how to write.
Mm.
And I just took the long view, right? And I didn't have any expectations because I had a good job in advertising, which I still have. Um, and then when I started really getting into, you know, in the about 12 years ago, about trying to win contests and expand my view, attend screenwriting events, meet other people, then I realized that I was missing a whole other half of the. I got this part, but this is like an empty cavern of nothing. And no wonder none of my scripts have been made, right? um, I joined a writers group, and now I run that writers group. And I've made 2 movies with people in that writers group because my reputation within that group. And one of the other things that I have to say about collaboration is really try to understand um, what the other person is saying, what the other person wants and needs. Um, because as a collaborator, it's my job. Like, for instance, the 2 people in my writers group that I wrote scripts with, they went on to direct those pieces.
Mm.
One was Caged, written with Aaron Fielman, who's the director, and one was Yaye Blind Samurai Woman, which is available on YouTube. Uh, it showed at Austin and a bunch of big film festivals, and won a lot of small film festivals. And that one was written with Akiko Izumitani, and it is and both of them came to me, not just because of my reputation, but because I tried to make it as easy for them to tell the story that they wanted to tell. And that's my job as the writer. And if I'm difficult and I say, no, this is, I don't want to do that. You're wrong. If you're unpleasant to work with, they're not going to want to work with you. Right. So that's just me working with another writer. But if I'm working for a director, like the 2 movies that I have in pre-production, I'm working with directors that, well, it's their movie now. I have to
Mhm.
try and tell the story the best that I can, but um, now it's what they want, right? So I'm trying to do the best that I can there, and always trying to get to yes, right? That's what I like to say, is getting to yes. And if you can agree and understand what you mean by yes, right? Because if you're saying yes, I had this horrible experience, 25 years ago, where a producer, read my script and said, you know, it was the worst thing they ever written. It was nothing like they wanted me. I'm like, to me, it was exactly what he asked for,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I'm like, well, no, I got to get to yes first at each of the steps, writing the log line, the premise line, the thematic statement. If I can understand those three things, if we can get to an agreement on those three things, we're writing the same script, we're writing the same story. And so be someone people want to work with. As much as you want to be the best writer, be someone you want that other people want to work with.
Yeah.
Say yes a lot, and leave your ego at the door. We're just writers. By the way, when you join the Writers Guild, one thing to note is that the writer and the director, they're when they advertise the movie, they have to be the same size font.
Mm.
So you'll get yours. So and you'll get more than your share if you just try your best and be helpful. Don't be a pushover though.
Yeah. Be nice, but be firm.
There you go.
Be nice, but be firm. And I have one last question. You talked about when you were being interviewed by Ching, phenomenal lady.
She's great. Yeah.
Yeah. That there really isn't a wrong way to write a log line.
I said that.
Yeah. You said there's some bad ways, but not really, because there are so many nuances. And I guess you were getting at the fact that there are just so many nuances to coming
Sure.
to that log line. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because as I said, when I was actually writing scripts, I'm no longer in that lane, but that was the hardest thing.
Right.
For me to do, even when it was my, I'm like, okay, I wrote, a good script. People say, oh, it's great. But when it came to that log line, so,
right.
I would write something. Oh, but so if there's no real wrong way to do it, how do you get to that sweet spot? I guess I'm asking.
I'm not sure what exactly I meant if I said that, because I think there are many wrong ways to write a log line.
Well, you actually said there's wrong ways and there's not. It was an interesting way you put it. So it was kind of like it's the way you said it was there's not really a wrong way, but there's not really a right way. It's just
like I was saying, it's an iteration and it's going to change.
Yes.
Even with myself. But what's not going to change is if you have a main character who is a hero, they're not going to change instantly into a protagonist. The villain is not going to turn into the force of Mother Nature, right? So the elements of story are going to stay the same, and how you express them is going to be really subjective, and it may depend on your mood, or it may come to a realization about tone that really you need to choose a different word that fits your tone, and that might change over time as you realize more and more about your story. I always think it's easier to write other people's log lines because I don't have an emotional attachment to elements of story. But I'll break it down really briefly.
Please.
I have the 9 elements of story. These are the things that I need to include in the story. Everything else I don't need to include. I might want to include it, but I don't have to. Those elements are context and setting. That is the main character. The main character could be a protagonist or a hero, and I expand that even further. There's what I call a resistor, a character who just doesn't want to change, and they don't have initial consequences for not changing. So the the stakes keep rising until it gets to a point where they have to change. That's like The Godfather. The other story is like a trailblazer, a character who has already changed prior to the movie, and they have to get other people to accept them for who they are, or to accept their worldview. And those are often in biopics, where the trailblazer, is not a protagonist. It's not a goal. It's like the goal is maybe to change someone's mind to be accepted. Then there's the observer. And the observer is like a narrator, but it might be like my favorite observer is Salieri from Amadeus, or Red from Shawshank Redemption. They're observing another character who is not a primary POV character, right? Amadeus is not the POV character. He's a focus character, just like Andy Dufresne from Shawshank Redemption. He has none of the elements of a protagonist in the way the story is told. He is a protagonist in his own story, but this is Red's story about him getting redemption, him finding himself, at the end of the movie after he sees what Andy Dufresne has accomplished. He's telling it in retrospect. He's a narrator. He's an observer, and one of my favorite movies.
Beautiful.
And then there's
Beautiful.
the leader amongst the ensemble. An ensemble of like, think about a horror movie where a bunch of kids are in a cabin. They can't leave, right? One of them emerges as the primary POV character, right? That just kind of takes care of the main character. Now, the type of opposition that they face will change depending on the type of main character you have. So a protagonist will have an antagonist, a hero will have a villain or a monster. A leader might have the force of culture or society, whatever. There are different ways to describe, like that kind of a story. And the leader emerges from the pack to become the POV character, but it could be against a monster, it could be against a villain, or it could be a survival movie, where you have one character who needs to lead a group of people, out of the wilderness, for instance, whatever, Mother Nature, or technology, or stay the night in a haunted house, or what have you. Right? There's usually a bunch of main. You wouldn't call them main characters. A bunch of characters that are attempting to achieve the same thing, and the ensemble kind of whittles down to one primary POV. And then the what I call triggering event. Triggering event is very simply like an inciting incident, but I think of it as the final event that changes the main character, from their status quo and forces them into action, and that forces them into setting a goal, or the hero doesn't necessarily have a goal except to defeat the villain. The villain is driving the story in the hero-villain story, but that triggering event leads to the goal. The goal must be, like we talked about, external and achievable, and the goal must have stakes if the character fails to achieve their goal, right? Those stakes have to be immediate upon them running out of time or options in the climax. That's the only difference between an escalation and a climax. Is an escalation doesn't necessarily bring in, will not bring in the final negative consequences, but the climax will. They're all escalations. They're all raising the stakes. Well, not all, because there's room to play in this sandbox. Let's have fun. Mm-hmm. And then there's tone. The tone of your story is going to be different if it's a comedy, or if it's a thriller, or if it's a drama, or whatever. The word choices that you do will affect how the logline is read, and you really want to make that element sing, right? The way you describe your main character can change just by an adjective. So and then I think that length is the last one. I'm not sure if I got through them all, but the length is 30 to 35 words. If it's shorter, then you're probably leaning heavy on your premise, and if it's longer, you got some work to do, because although I like to say there's no logline police. There's nobody that's saying a 40-word logline is wrong, but it can feel long. It could feel really long at 30 words.
Mhm.
But I think most of the examples that I have in the book, 30, I'd say 30 to 35 words. Maybe Lord of the Rings was a little longer, but that's a long movie. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But wow, this was an absolute masterclass. And ladies and gentlemen, if you were here tonight, you got some phenomenal tips on the best way to craft a kick-ass log line. But here's the thing, if you didn't, James, where can they find and purchase your book? Because I plan on getting it myself. I haven't written in forever, but I always like to understand things. So
Can I
where can,
just say that
sure, please.
even for you, I would say that the book is going to help you to um, express the idea of your podcast or your guest, right? It's going to help you if you understand all the elements of what your story is. What's your story, right?
Mhm.
If you can tell that in a single sentence, that may be of benefit to you. So it's not just for writers; it is for novelists or for screenwriters. It's playwrights, uh, especially for people who write like articles.
Mhm.
Right, writing briefly is hard. I wish I like. But anyway, the book "Mastering the Logline" is available on Amazon, and I know you'll probably think it's a couple $100, but it's not. It's not even $100. Tell you what, for you today only, 19.99.
Hey, that's a phenomenal. That's an investment. I always tell people you're not
Yeah,
spending money, you're investing in your company.
yeah.
That's what I tell
And then
people.
join the Logline group. Post your Logline. Read the book. Give it a go and join the group, and you get free. I mean, as long as I'm there, I don't get paid for that. It's just something I do because I get better when I work on my log lines. I get better when I work on your log line. I get better.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah, and I'm definitely getting the book because one thing that I have to do every week is I have to come up with titles for my shows
Oh yeah.
every single week. So that will definitely be a help. And I just love learning, and I learned so much tonight. So where can people find you, James?
Um, well, that's a good question. I am on Facebook,
Okay.
but not much. Um, I don't do a lot of social media. I should. We talk about the business. I'm old school. I have a lot of, um, um, let's just say, old school friends, right?
Okay.
But if anybody wants to get a hold of me, it's screenwriter@gmail.com. That's SCRENRIOTER, a riot on the screen, screenwriter@gmail.com. And if you have any questions, shoot them over.
Buy the book, join the Facebook group. Even if you're not a writer, join. If you're in this business, you should join that group because it's so symbiotic. Everything on a film set is symbiotic.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
always great to know what the other person is doing and how they think to actually make you a better DP, to make you a
Right.
better editor if you know how the story works and how the story flows. So, but
Exactly.
you were going to say?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that you could do as a young writer um, besides reading the book, and that is join a group, join a screenwriting group. Mine is full, but there are lots of them out there, and a lot of them are meeting remotely now, um, and there's nothing more valuable than expanding your network through people who are like-minded. They want to expand their network. They want to get better, and they're putting in the effort, right? So put in the effort, join a group if you don't already have one, read the book, and then just practice, 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 practice. So how do
Great.
you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
Practice. Well,
Yeah.
James, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been absolutely phenomenal. Ladies and gentlemen, again, if
Thank you,
you
Floyd.
enjoyed this show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast on Apple. We would love when you subscribe. It's Floyd Marshall Jr., a conversation with Floyd Marshall Jr. on Apple and all streaming platforms. But more importantly, again, please go join that group. Please go join the Facebook group, or as James said, join a writers group where you're supported, where you can find your tribe and find your circle. It is so very important to make you a better writer and to bounce your ideas off of people that will critique but not criticize, which is so important. So
That's a
again,
great point.
my wife gives me credit because sometimes I make them. Sometimes, every now and again. So it'll be another 5 years. But no, I'm just playing. But yeah, just make sure you find a support group, and again, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you enjoyed it. Again, please go buy the book, because as I always say, you're not spending money, ladies and gentlemen. You truly are investing in your career. I always tell filmmakers, screenwriters, whoever will listen, that you are a sole proprietor, and if you are not investing in your business, you can't expect anyone else to do so. So go buy the book. And James, can we get that title one more time so they can't say, well, I didn't know what the title was. So can you give it to them one more time?
Mastering the Logline: How to Excite Hollywood in a Single Sentence.
And it's also going to be in the show notes. So
Yep.
you can't say, well, I
Yep.
didn't know what the name of the book was. It was in the show
Yep.
notes, and all that other good stuff. And again, you can follow me on social media. It's Floyd Marshall Junior everywhere. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on a conversation with. And as I always like to say, love it like a hobby, but above all else, treat it like a business. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much, Floyd.
You are so welcome.